Hi everyone, welcome back to our ninth lecture. Now that we've seen an extensive set of examples illustrating words that are restricted to applying within a given bounding domain inside a word or inside a root or inside an utterance, let's use a small metaphor to try to clarify this point, and then we'll move on to seeing examples of rules that need to make reference to boundaries in order to be able to apply. So let's consider that we have these different morphological boundaries like root, stem, word, phrase that act like fences. And each of these are high, each of these fences are bigger, taller than the succeeding fences. Now, so a word bounded rule, if it sees a root boundary or a stem boundary, there's a missing right bracket here, but preceding the stem here, we'll ignore that. When a word bounded rule sees a stem boundary or a root boundary, it's simply going to ignore those root and stem boundaries. So here are two words, height in a dialect of English that has Canadian raising, and padding, so the gerund form of the verb to pat. And in this case, both of these rules, as we have just seen, are word-bounded rules, but the fact that there is morphological structure in the word height, possibly a derivational suffix ta added to a root high, and an inflectional suffix ing added to the root pat, those are not going to have any impact on the application of these rules. So the word-bounded rule, it is able to leap over the boundaries formed by the root and the stem. So we can think of the rules themselves as being like goats, which are bigger and able to jump higher. And so larger goats are able to leap higher and able to leap over fences that are higher. And in this sense, the British R epenthesis rule, which was only blocked by a pause in utterance boundary, that would be a very large goat. It's able to jump over not only word boundaries, in fact, but also over phrase boundaries, as we've seen. Rules like tapping and Canadian raising, which are bounded by words, are medium-sized goats that are able to jump fairly high. They're able to jump over the root boundary and jump over the stem boundary, ignoring those. Whereas pre-L monophthongization, the last of the processes, that root-bounded case, would be a pygmy goat. It can't even get over the root boundary, we should read here, not the stem. It can't access an L, which it needs for its conditioning environment that falls outside of the same root. Now, some rules that actually need boundaries of some kind in order to be able to apply should seem fairly familiar to us. And in particular, we've encountered a number of rules that make reference to word boundaries as part of their conditioning environments. So for instance, we've seen in German and Russian and Polish a process that needs to look for the right edge of a word, this process of word final obstruent devoicing, correct? Which, for instance, is responsible for the alternation between Zug and Züge in voicing of this obstruent. So just to remind us briefly, this process stated the same, a process that we can formulate identically for both English and German would state that a non-sonorant consonant becomes voiceless at the right edge of a word. So in this case, it's not that the word boundary blocks a process from applying, but rather the rule needs to see that a word boundary is present in order to apply. Also, in the morphophonological analysis of the Japanese verb in the exercises from week 8, there was at least one process which needed to refer to the boundary of a stem. Specifically a process that deleted vowels in hiatus where there's a stem boundary. So this hiatus resolution rule of Japanese without the presence of a stem boundary would simply look like this. It would say that a vowel is deleted following another vowel. If we had this underlying representation, the verb stem meaning change, ai, and the inflectional suffix itai, if hiatus resolution applied without reference to any other boundaries, the result would be kata. So hiatus resolution would see, oh, there is an a preceding this a, so we will delete the a. There's an e preceding this vowel, so we will delete this e. And here there is a e, there's an a preceding the e. But that's clearly not what happens. The only vowel that is deleted is this e at the beginning of the desiderative suffix. So for that reason, we found that hiatus resolution is restricted to applying to sequences of vowels that span a stem boundary. The rule is sensitive to the right edge of a stem and is only able to apply when the boundary between a stem and inflectional affix is present. Let's take another sort of similar example to the Japanese case from Polish. So in Polish, this rule states that an underlying alveolar sibilant fricative sa will become a palatal sibilant fricative hya at the right edge of a stem when a front vowel follows. So if we take the data here, we can see this. We have an S at the right edge of a word when these words don't have any additional inflectional affixes, pas, servis, silos. But when a further inflectional suffix is added, so these are front vowel suffixes a for the locative or the diminutive suffix ik, that provides the segmental context that we need. But in that case, then when those suffixes are added, the S at the end of the stem becomes palatalized to hya. And in particular, of particular interest are the words for auto repair shop and silo, where the stems themselves, servis and silos, do contain the purely segmental context. So there's an S preceding a front vowel. So if this additional segmental information, this additional information from the boundary were not needed, we would expect for a rule, again, let's formulate the rule, try to formulate the rule without the boundary present, as we did for the Japanese hiatus resolution rule. It would predict that from an input servis, that it would become servis, which is, of course, not actually the case. So we can deliberately contrast then, for instance, let's contrast now knowing that we need this stem boundary to be present. This process is only able to apply to an S that occurs at the edge of a stem. We can contrast servis in its basic form with the locative form of servis. So in the basic form, S palatalization is not able to apply to either of the S's, because in this case, although there is a front vowel following the S, there is no stem boundary between the S and the front vowel. And in the S at the right edge of the stem, in the basic form, there's no front vowel following. If we add the locative suffix a, now the condition has been met for the palatalization of that S. because it is at a stem boundary and is followed now by a front vowel. So the stem boundary part, that condition is there in both of these forms, but the addition of the locative suffix provides the needed segmental context. So sort of continue our goat metaphor, we can see that rules that need need to refer to boundaries of some kind in order to apply at all are not like goats that don't try to leap over fences in order to access other grass. So if we think that word-bounded rules are medium-sized goats that will leap over roots and stems in order to find more possible targets of application, to find more delicious grass to eat, then instead these are goats, these rules that operate at the boundaries of words or stems are like goats that like to stay at the edge of the fence and find grass that the other goats are ignoring. Okay, let's pause again here, and we will then finally come to looking at the interface between syntax and phonology.